It's April 2019 now, so it's 1 year passed since the Sony's A7 Mark III was first released. And now I'm finally doing a review of this camera. Well, that doesn't mean I own this camera for a year. I only used it for about 3 months. You know, it was a very popular camera at the time and just sold out everywhere, and people who want to purchase this camera need to wait months and months for back order. I wasn't rushed at the time, so I keep using my Sony A7 Mark II at the time, and until last December 2018 I made the shot and purchased this camera. Even though I purchased this camera in December, I only started using this camera in late January. So it's about 3 months of usage now, and what I think about this camera is it's a good upgrade from the Sony A7 Mark II, and the things I like about this camera, the things I don't like this camera, and for people who are still interested in this camera, is this still a good investment or good choice for you to purchase this camera even right now in 2019. I still remember back in 2018 when this camera was first announced in February, I did make an impression video about this camera saying how I'm excited about this camera. And since now I have the actual camera here, and let's do an actual review of this camera. So back in 2018 when Sony first announced this camera, it said it has a brand new sensor in here, which is 24.2 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor BSI. For photo, it can shoot up to 10 frames per second both in mechanic and silent mode. And Sony claims it can give you up to 15 stops of dynamic range in low light, and especially the ISO performance has been improved so much, and it's even better than the A7R Mark III. And so if you like to shoot photos in RAW file, it can still shoot photos in 14-bit uncompressed RAW. We have this new menu system on this camera as of the A6500. It is different to the A7 Mark II and A7R Mark II, which is our previous generation of the Sony cameras, but still this is a very complex menu system. I think too much things in this menu system. I know maybe Sony just trying to let you access all the functionality on this camera as possible, but I still think there's too much things in here. Some of the functionality you actually needed, you need to go very deep in the menu. I mean, it's definitely not a good sign for people who are new to Sony camera, especially for starters. And if you are a starter or new to Sony cameras, I strongly recommend you to go through all the menus when you first got your Sony camera. But on the good hand of this, you can customize your own menus on this camera to create a favorite menu of your own for faster operations. The screen on this camera is a 3-inch articulating, but still it's not a fully articulating screen. You cannot really flip up or flip down or flip out sideways, and the resolution of this is not that good. It's under 1,000,000 dot resolution, which I don't really enjoy to use it for photo shooting, because what you're seeing on the screen may different to the actual image that you shot on an SD card. Basically, every time when you shoot photos, don't trust it on the screen, because I'm pretty sure when you review your files in your computer, it shows totally different images compared to the ones that shows on your screen. For example, if I was shooting wedding photos outside and I want to show the photos to the client, and they may thought the picture does not look good, and they may think that's the picture I took, but actually it's not. But there's one small touch on this screen. You see, every time when you put something close to the EVF, usually that would be your face, it will automatically shut off the screen, but sometimes that could be something else, such as microphone cables. So it's pretty annoying. But if you just lift up the screen even by a little, the problem just solved. Whatever the things you put in front of the EVF or very close to the EVF sensors, it will not shut off the screen. And I think this is very good for people who like to use the A7 Mark III camera on a gimbal, so you can see your screen all the time. This camera uses the same batteries on the A7R Mark III and the A9, which is the new Sony Z batteries. It has a much better battery life than before, about 2.2 times more compared to the A7 Mark II. And Sony says it can approximately gives you up to 710 shots if you're using a screen, or 610 if you're using EVF. From my experience, it can easily go through a full day if you're just outside to doing casual shooting for photos and some of the videos. But if I want to shoot a lot of videos outside, I probably just need 1 or maybe 2 batteries. If you have the 2 batteries or maybe 3 batteries, it can easily go through a full day of photo shooting and lots of 4K video shooting as well. Compared to before, I need to bring at least 5 batteries for my A7 Mark II when I go out. Another good thing on this camera is now you have dual SD card slot. One is UHS 1 and the other one is UHS 2. You can choose the photos in one card or the videos in another card, or you can choose to store both photos and videos in one card, and at the same time you make a copy to another card, sort of like a backup for the second card in case you experience any SD card failures. But personally, I never had SD card failures on my cameras before, so that's not a big problem for me so far. Also on this camera, it now has USB 3.1 Type-C port, and for faster data transfer, or you can also use it as a charged battery. You can use the battery bank to charge the battery while you are outside shooting. Yes, the body is rated as splash and dust proof, but a lot of time with the port being wide open, I really doubted how much of proof this camera can be. But right now I'm not using the camera under any extreme conditions, so I'll need to see in the future if this is a really big deal for me. The video record button is now on the side of VVF. Some people really like that design. It really don't matter for me because I already get used to the recording button on the side of the grip. I think on the side of grip is easier for you to recording if you're using the camera to recording yourself. So easier for you to reach out on the side of the grip and just press that recording button. But overall, I'm okay with that. And also on this camera, now you have 4 customized buttons, so you can set up the way you like for faster operation on this camera. And yes, the Sony added a thumbstick on this camera for change the focus point or navigate through the menu system. Now on the top, the switch knob is not lockable like the A9 or A7R series camera, but I feel okay, it's pretty tight. I never find myself to accidentally switching to a different mode even once, so not a big deal. One thing I want to talk about a button on this camera. If you're new to Sony camera, then it doesn't matter, but if you ever use the Sony A7 Mark II or Sony A7R Mark II or S2, then you will be noticed all the feelings on all the buttons is different. Right after the first time when I tried this camera on my hand, I noticed that. On the A7 Mark II, all the buttons on those cameras are like very crispy click. So you click it, you can hear the sound, you can feel the feedbacks. But on the A7 Mark III, I'm not sure on the A7R Mark III, but because I never tried that camera, but on the A7 Mark III, it feels more soft. Like more mushy feeling, like there's something rubber or spring holding underneath the button, so it's like really soft feeling. Definitely that's one different feelings to all the buttons here. And also even for this on and off switch, it just feels soft as well. I thought this was something that Sony has been changed for all of their new cameras, but when the Sony A6400 came out, which is the one I'm shooting with, the button on the A6400 is still the same feeling on the A7 Mark II or A7R Mark II. It's still like crispy, feels like just different. From my opinion, the colors on the A7 Mark III have definitely improved over the A7 Mark II or the A7R Mark II. I'm also making a comparison video between the A7 Mark III and the A7R Mark II. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for my future videos. I say the image quality out of A7 Mark III is good for most of the people, and especially for the people who just like to upload their photos on the internet. With 24.2 megapixel sensor, it is totally capable and enough to do so. If you like to shoot photos in RAW files, this camera you can shoot in 14-bit uncompressed RAW with buffer up to approximately 40 images, 10 images per second for like 4 seconds until it is slowed down. But if you would just like to shoot the photos in JPEG, so basically you can shoot as much as you can in a single roll. One big thing on this A7 Mark III I had to say is the ISO improvement. For shooting videos, you can go from 100 up to 102,400 ISOs. For shooting photos, it's expandable from 50 up to 204,800 ISOs. cleaner image in low light, that's good. I think especially for people who like to use this camera, shoot in low light, night scene. Vloggers sometimes vlogging in the low light situation, and this is a good option. The camera has the IBS, the in-body image stabilization, and Sony says it can give you up to 5 stops of stabilizations. Whatever the lens you put on this camera, it is gonna be stabilized. Well, even though we know the Sony IBS is not that good as of the Panasonic cameras such as GH5 or the Olympus cameras, but still I think it's better than nothing. It's good to have it. Alright, now what about videos? It is one of the few cameras that you can shoot 4K in 4 frame. You can shoot 4K UHD up to 30 frames per second. And the video image you actually getting is from a 6K output and downsampling to 4K. And that is a 4 pixel readout without pixel bending and gives a way cleaner and more sharper 4K images. But if you want the best quality of that 4K video, you can only shoot that in 24 frames per second, not the 30 frames per second. If you want to shoot footage in 30 frames per second, you will also experience a slightly crop on the images. In 1080p Full HD, you can shoot from 24 frames per second all the way up to 120 frames per second and maximum of 100 megabytes per second. Well, this 120 frames per second is different compared to the A7R Mark II. This camera is actually gives you better 120 frames per second images compared to the A7R Mark II. And of course, that's doubling the frame rates compared to the A7 Mark II, which only had maximum of 60 frames per second in 1080p. Still, the Sony cameras, you can only shoot video files up to a maximum at 100 megabytes per second bit rates. You are still limited to the post-production, especially for color grading of your video files. Compared to some of the other cameras like Panasonic GH5 or the Canon cameras that you can go all the way up to 400 megabytes per second or maybe sometimes 600 megabytes per second. That's gonna make a huge difference for you to work in post-productions. That's limited to the HDMI port as well. Even if you use external recorder, that 100 megabytes per second bitrate won't be expandable to much higher. The one big thing I like it very much on this camera is the autofocus system. Sony's autofocus system in recent years has been improved so much. If you see the Sony A7 Mark II only had a 117 autofocus point and now you have 693. That's a huge improvement over the years. So no doubt the autofocus system on the Sony's camera is a big thing for lots of people, especially for people who do a lot of video work and vlogging. With this awesome autofocus system, it has the autofocus tracking and the eye autofocus. So whether you shoot in photos or videos, it can track or lock on eyes or subjects. I'm constantly getting about 90 to 95% accuracy from this autofocus, which I'm really impressed with this Sony's AF capabilities. So having the awesome autofocus system on your camera is really a precious thing for you. But is the A7 Mark III, the autofocus system, perfect? No. Definitely it's not perfect. I don't think there's a perfect solution or perfect system on the market yet. So what's the downside of this? Well, the face detection will not work if you use to shoot in proxy mode or at 120 frames per second. And it will also not work if you're using HDMI output for external recorders or monitors. Alright then, I was just using Sony's remote app to monitor and shoot a video. No, the face detection will also not working if you're just using the Sony remote app on your phone or on your tablet. Come on Sony, it's your own app. It's your own freaking app. I don't know why Sony doesn't allow the face detection over remote app or monitor. Just doesn't make a sense. I don't know what's going on. And the Sony's app, remote app, is one of the terrible apps that have ever been used on the camera. There's not that much things they can control unless to record buttons and take photos and change maybe exposure settings. That's it. There's not that much on the remote control app, so you can control your camera other than just use it as a monitor. You can shoot your footage on the Sony's S-Log2 and S-Log3 profiles if you like to do color grading on your footages, but just be careful, that requires a lot of post-production and color reproduction work. And another way for you to get instant color reproduction, sort of like color grading a video like HDR, I suggest you to use the Sony HLG profile. HLG you can shoot in both photos and videos, so that's easy for you to match the color in post-production very easily. HLG is a common different standard across a different manufacturer and brands, that's also easily for you to match up the color in the post-production. So for example, the DJI is also in the HLG standards. If you shoot HLG on DJI drones, and you can easily mix that drone footage in your Sony's camera footage and make same color productions. It looks like just shot on one device. Also, like you can shoot Canon's on HLG, Panasonic on HLG, and also Sony on HLG. All the footage mixed together, so easier for you to do a color grading, color matching in the post-production. Saves a lot of workflows and gives you very similar colors across different devices. And of course, this A7 Mark III does have an internal microphone, and the quality from that internal microphone is not bad. You know, it does the job. Of course, if you have external microphone, that's always better. So overall, the A7 Mark III is a very compact camera that packed with a lot of features. The 24.2 megapixel photos, the 4K videos from 6K downsampling to 4K. You are getting a very good quality for both photos and videos that can compete with another very high-end or high-priced cameras, and it's also capable to shoot photos and videos in low light situations. It's stabilized with 5-axis IBIS, and yes, it has some cons like the 3-inch touchscreen, but is it a deal breaker on this camera? I don't think so. Especially it priced at under $2,000 US and it produced awesome result. Hell yeah, I think it's worth to buy it. Even right now in 2019. I never thought there's an actual fair price for a camera, but if you're considering the price range in these categories, you will find pretty much the A7 Mark III is the best choice. I hope you guys like this video. If you like, please hit that like button. If you don't, the button's still there. Subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers guys.